As the sun blazed relentlessly in the desert sky, Lan Khan's body was parched, sweat flowing like a stream. 48 hours without tools, without supplies, only her will and her own sweat to filter the last drop of water that would save her life. Could a human conquer the harsh desert with nothing but their own body? The scorching sun beat down mercilessly on the golden sands of Nimsa Desert. The year was 2095, and the first day of the 48-hour challenge was underway. Lan Khan, a final-year natural biology student, stood alone on the burning sand, her heart racing with apprehension. The challenge had been organized by Planetary Ecology Corporation, a global entity known for its extreme ecological tests meant to raise awareness about water conservation. This particular event had attracted billionaires, philanthropists, and media from across the planet, all eager to witness who would emerge as the desert hero. The rules were brutally simple. Each contestant would be dropped in the middle of the desert with only the clothes on their back. No tools, no equipment, no supplies. They had to survive for 48 hours and find the legendary Century Well hidden somewhere in the vast expanse of sand. Their final task was to bring back one pure drop of water from the well. The challenge was being broadcast live across the globe, part entertainment, part ecological awareness campaign. Lan Khan shielded her eyes from the blinding sunlight, taking in her surroundings. The vast expanse of golden sand stretched endlessly in all directions, with temperatures soaring to 50 degrees C during the day and plummeting to near freezing at night. Her father, a water engineer, had taught her about survival since childhood, but she had never experienced such extreme desert conditions firsthand. As the hover transport that had dropped her off disappeared into the distance, Lan Khan realized something was terribly wrong. Looking around, she noticed the other contestants at least had one basic tool, a multi-purpose knife, a small water container, something to give them a fighting chance. But she had nothing except the thin t-shirt and undergarments she wore. A rush of panic washed over her as she realized there had been a mistake in her registration. But it was too late to do anything about it now. The transport was gone, and she was officially a solo contestant. Sweat already poured down her forehead, her body rapidly losing precious moisture under the merciless sun. Her first thought was grim. Is there any chance of survival when I have nothing in my hands? Fighting the initial wave of panic, Lan Khan tried to recall everything her father had taught her about surviving in extreme conditions. She checked the laser map installed on her wrist, the only device allowed by the organizers, providing basic guidance to the Century Well. Taking a deep breath, she began walking toward the nearest rock formation she could see in the distance, hoping to find shade. Her internal struggle began immediately. Just breathe evenly. Don't panic. You'll find a way to survive, she told herself. But another voice in her head countered. Without water, without tools. How long before dehydration sets in? 3 hours? 6? She pushed these thoughts away and focused on placing one foot in front of the other. The sand burned through her thin shoes, and by midday, her throat felt like sandpaper. Every step became increasingly difficult as the heat intensified. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, she reached a small rocky outcrop that provided minimal shade. Collapsing against the cool stone, Lan Khan closed her eyes momentarily, trying to regulate her breathing and conserve energy. As she sat there, memories of her childhood flooded back, her father teaching her about water, its importance, and various methods of finding it in desperate situations. Water is life, Khan, he would always say. Learn to respect it, find it, preserve it. These skills might save your life someday. How prophetic those words seemed now. The afternoon stretched on endlessly. Lan Khan moved carefully from shadow to shadow, trying to minimize her exposure to direct sunlight. She noticed her shirt was drenched with sweat, and an idea began to form in her mind. If she couldn't find water, perhaps she could make it from her own body. As the sun began to set, the temperature dropped dramatically. Lan Khan huddled against the rocks, shivering as the cold, desert night set in. But she couldn't afford to rest for long. This was her chance to implement what her father had called the sweat distillation method, using her body heat to evaporate sweat and then condensing it into pure water. She removed her sweat-soaked t-shirt and wrung it out as much as possible. Looking around, she searched for something to collect the precious liquid. That's when she noticed a thin plastic sheet that had been provided to all contestants, but had been tucked into a pocket she hadn't discovered until now. Her heart leaped with hope. Working quickly in the fading light, Lan Khan folded the plastic sheet to create a sealed pouch. She placed the wrung-out shirt inside, then positioned the pouch close to her body, using her body heat to encourage evaporation. As the cold, night air cooled the outer surface of the plastic, the evaporated sweat began to condense into tiny droplets. "It's working," she whispered, watching with fascination as small beads of water formed and trickled down into the bottom of the makeshift pouch. By focusing on this task, she managed to ignore the biting cold of the desert night. Throughout the night, Lan Khan repeated the process several times, wringing out her shirt when it became dry and replacing it in the pouch. By dawn, she had collected approximately 50 milliliters of water. Not much, but enough to keep her going. She sipped the water sparingly, savoring each precious drop. As the sun rose on the second day, the temperature began to climb rapidly once again. Lan Khan tore a strip of fabric from her shirt to create a face covering, protecting her mouth and eyes from the blowing sand. With the small amount of water she had collected giving her renewed strength, she consulted her laser map and began walking toward the coordinates of the Century Well. The desert seemed even more unforgiving in the harsh light of day 2. The golden sands reflected the sunlight, creating a glare that made it difficult to see even with her makeshift face covering. Lan Khan's lips were cracked, her skin burning, but she pressed on, driven by determination. Around midday, disaster struck. Without warning, a sandstorm materialized on the horizon, a towering wall of swirling sand rushing toward her with frightening speed. Lan Khan frantically looked for shelter, spotting a small crevice in a nearby rock formation. She ran toward it, her legs burning with effort, and squeezed herself into the narrow opening just as the storm hit with full force. Sand whipped past the entrance of her shelter, occasionally finding its way inside to sting her face and eyes. The howling wind was deafening, and for a moment, Lan Khan felt completely overwhelmed by the power of nature. Her shirt tore further as she pressed against the rough rock walls, and sand infiltrated her throat, causing her to cough violently. Each cough produced more sweat, which under normal circumstances would have been perfect for her distillation method. But the conditions made it impossible to collect anything. All she could do was wait out the storm, her body trembling with exhaustion and fear. When the sandstorm finally subsided hours later, Lan Khan crawled out of her shelter, only to discover that her laser map had been damaged in the chaos. The screen flickered weakly before going dark completely. Her heart pounded furiously in her chest as the implications became clear. Without directional guidance to the Century Well, her chances of survival had just dropped to nearly zero. Standing in the aftermath of the storm, surrounded by a landscape that had been completely transformed, Lan Khan felt truly alone for the first time since the challenge began. The desert stretched endlessly in all directions, with no landmarks to guide her. She closed her eyes, fighting back tears of frustration. Crying would only waste precious moisture. It was then that she heard it, a faint call for help coming from somewhere nearby. Following the sound, she climbed over a dune to find a figure half buried in sand. It was Chu Min, another contestant she recognized from her university. He had fallen from a dune during the sandstorm and dislocated his shoulder, leaving him unable to continue on his own. He lay awkwardly in the hot sand, his hand trembling as he held up his own damaged laser map. "Khan," he croaked, recognizing her. "What are you doing here? Go on, save yourself." Lan Khan stood frozen, faced with a critical decision. Helping Chu Min would certainly slow her down, possibly preventing her from finding the Century well in time. But leaving him meant condemning him to almost certain death under the merciless sun. For a brief moment, the competitive part of her mind argued that this was, after all, a challenge, every contestant for themselves. But then her father's voice echoed in her memory. The true measure of survival isn't just keeping yourself alive. It's preserving our humanity in the face of extreme conditions. Making her decision, Lan Khan knelt beside Chu Min. "I'm going to help you," she said firmly. "Why?" he asked, his voice weak with pain. "Your life is now tied to mine? I'm just holding you back." "No one gets left behind," she replied, examining his injured shoulder, using knowledge from her basic first aid training. Lan Khan fashioned a makeshift sling, using another strip torn from her already ragged shirt. With careful manipulation, she managed to push his shoulder joint back into place, causing Chu Min to cry out in pain before slumping back in relief. "Thank you," he muttered, clearly surprised by her willingness to help. As the afternoon wore on, Lan Khan shared her sweat distillation technique with Chu Min. At first, he was skeptical, even concerned that using such a method might be considered cheating. "It's not against the rules," Lan Khan assured him. "We're using our own bodies and the plastic sheet they provided. That's what this challenge is about. Innovation in the face of scarcity." Reluctantly, Chu Min agreed to try, and soon they had set up a more efficient system, using both their body heat to increase evaporation. As they worked together, Lan Khan learned that Chu Min had come from a wealthy family and had entered the challenge more for the prestige than the ecological message. "I thought having the best gear would give me an edge," he admitted ruefully. "I spent thousands on training with survival experts, but none of them mentioned anything like your sweat technique." As night fell again, they huddled together for warmth, taking turns monitoring their water collection system. By the morning of the third day, they had collected enough water to keep them both going, though Chu Min's injured shoulder meant he moved more slowly, requiring frequent breaks. "You should go ahead," he suggested during one such break. "You have a chance to win this if you're not dragging me along." Lan Khan shook her head. "We're in this together now. 2 minds are better than 1, even with your bum shoulder." They trudged on through the morning, using the position of the sun as a rough guide, since both their laser maps were now useless. Min, despite his injury, proved to be observant, noticing subtle changes in the sand's texture that might indicate underground water sources. Together, they were making better progress than Lan Khan might have made alone. Around midday, they decided to attempt to activate the emergency beacon function of their damaged laser devices, hoping to at least get some directional guidance from the challenge organizers' support aircraft. As they fiddled with the devices, a faint image flickered on Min's screen, not of a map, but of a creature. "What is that?" Lan Khan asked, peering at the blurry image. "Heat signature," Min whispered, his face paling. "It's a heat-ground lizard." Lan Khan felt her blood run cold. Heat-ground lizards were notorious desert predators, more than 2 meters long, with armor-like scales and incredible speed across sand. And according to the heat signature on the flickering screen, one was heading straight for them, apparently attracted by the faint laser emissions from their devices. "Turn it off," Lan Khan hissed. But it was too late. The sand about 50 meters away began to shift, and then a massive, reptilian head emerged, its eyes fixed on them with predatory focus. "Run!" Min shouted, struggling to his feet with his injured arm. They bolted across the sand, but the lizard was frighteningly fast, covering ground with alarming speed. Lan Khan's mind raced, trying to remember anything her father might have said about desert predators. Heat-ground lizards had poor eyesight, but excellent heat and movement detection. They needed to disrupt its senses somehow. "Your shirt," she called to Min. "Wet it with the water we collected and throw it away from us." Understanding immediately, Min used their precious water to dampen his shirt, then flung it as far as he could to their right. The lizard hesitated, momentarily confused by the moving fabric with its human scent. Taking advantage of the distraction, they changed direction, heading toward a rocky area where the lizard would have more difficulty navigating. But they weren't fast enough. The lizard quickly realized the deception and resumed its pursuit, now moving even more aggressively. In a desperate attempt to slow it down, Lan Khan grabbed handfuls of sand and threw them toward the creature's eyes. Some of the grains found their mark, causing the lizard to shake its head in irritation, but it kept coming. The rocks were tantalizingly close now, but Chu Min, hampered by his injury, was falling behind. His foot caught in a soft patch of sand, and he went down hard. The lizard lunged, its massive jaws opening wide. Without hesitation, Lan Khan turned back, grabbing Min's good arm and yanking him to his feet with strength she didn't know she possessed. They stumbled the last few meters to the rocks together, squeezing into a narrow crevice that the lizard couldn't enter, though it tried repeatedly, its claws scraping against the stone just inches from their faces. For nearly an hour, they remained trapped in the crevice, listening to the frustrated hisses and scratches of the predator outside. Finally, perhaps deciding they weren't worth the effort, the lizard retreated, leaving them trembling with relief and exhaustion. When they finally emerged from their shelter, Chu Min looked at Lan Khan with newfound respect. "You saved my life," he said quietly. "You could have left me there. You should have, for your own sake." "That's not who I am," she replied simply. "You're stronger than I thought," he admitted. "Stronger than most people I know." Something had changed between them. What had begun as a reluctant partnership born of necessity had transformed into a genuine bond forged in the crucible of shared danger. As the sun began to set on their second day in the desert, they made a pact to stick together until the end, whatever that might be. With renewed determination, they continued their journey as the stars began to appear in the desert sky. Using basic celestial navigation that Min had learned during his expensive survival training, they managed to establish a general direction toward where they believed the Century Well might be located. The night was bitterly cold, but they used their proximity to maintain body heat while continuing to collect water through their sweat distillation system. By morning, they had collected enough to sustain them for several more hours of travel. As the third day dawned, both were exhausted, their bodies pushed to the limits of endurance. But on the horizon, they spotted a series of laser columns, markers placed by the organizers to indicate the location of the Century Well. New energy surged through them as they quickened their pace toward the beacons. Upon reaching the site, they found a depression in the sand, clearly man-made, with signs that other contestants had already been there. The well itself was below the sand layer, requiring them to dig down to access the water. Without tools, they had no choice but to use their bare hands, scooping away the hot sand grain by grain. Progress was painfully slow, and the sun beat down on their backs as they worked, their already depleted bodies struggling with the exertion. After hours of digging, the sand suddenly shifted beneath them. Chu Min, who had been digging deeper than Lan Khan, felt the ground give way beneath his feet. With a cry of alarm, he began to sink as a pocket of air collapsed beneath them, threatening to bury him alive. Lan Khan lunged forward, grabbing his hand just as he was about to be swallowed by the sand. She pulled with all her might, her hands burning against the hot sand. But Min was too heavy, and she felt him slipping from her grasp. "Let go!" he shouted. "Save yourself!" "No!" she screamed back, redoubling her efforts. Her muscles screamed in protest, but somehow, she found the strength to hold on. With one final, desperate heave, she managed to pull Min free from the collapsing sand pocket. They collapsed together at the edge of the pit, gasping for breath. When they looked down, they saw that the collapse had actually helped them. The depression had deepened enough to reveal a glint of water below. Staring at each other in disbelief, they realized they had found it, the Century Well, with its precious water just barely visible beneath the last layer of sand. "You should go down," Chumin said, cradling his re-injured shoulder. "I'll keep watch up here." Lan Kan hesitated. "But you need the water too." "I do, but I can't climb down with this shoulder. You go, get what we need, and we'll both have completed the challenge." Still uncertain, Lan Kan began to carefully descend into the pit. The sand walls were unstable, threatening to collapse again with each movement. Slowly, meticulously, she made her way down until her feet touched the damp bottom of the well. There, a small pool of clear water glistened, the underground aquifer that fed the Century Well. It was the most beautiful sight she had ever seen. Kneeling beside it, Lan Kan cupped her hands and brought the cool, life-giving liquid to her parched lips, drinking deeply for the first time in days. The sensation was indescribable, like life itself flowing back into her desiccated body. Remembering the challenge requirements, she took off what remained of her tattered shirt and rinsed it in the water, cleaning away the accumulated salt and sand. Then, using her now refined sweat distillation technique, she set up a more elaborate system in the cool, humid air of the well chamber. She positioned her clean shirt over the water surface to absorb moisture, then used the plastic sheet to create a condensation trap. Over the next several hours, as the temperature outside dropped with the coming of night, pure water condensed inside her trap, collecting drop by precious drop. By midnight, she had collected over 200 milliliters of pure, distilled water, more than enough to meet the challenge requirements and to save both herself and Chumin. Carefully storing the water in a container she fashioned from another section of her plastic sheet, Lan Kan began the difficult climb back up to the surface. Chumin was waiting anxiously, having spent hours alone with nothing but the desert wind and his thoughts for company. When he saw Lan Kan emerge with the water container, his eyes filled with tears. "You did it," he whispered, taking a small sip when she offered it to him. "If it weren't for you, I would certainly be dead by now." They drank sparingly, knowing they still needed to reach the extraction point where the organizers' hover transports would be waiting to collect successful contestants. According to their original briefing, this point was located near a small mountain ridge, several kilometers from the well. With only 3 hours remaining before the 48-hour challenge deadline, they set off toward the extraction point, moving as quickly as Chumin's injury would allow. The water had revitalized them somewhat, but both were still dangerously weak from their ordeal. As they approached the small ridge where the hover transports were supposed to land, they encountered a group of other contestants who had failed to collect water from the well and were waiting to be evacuated. These contestants looked at Lan Kan and Chumin with a mixture of respect and envy when they saw the water container. One of the challenge organizers approached them, a tablet in hand. "Only contestants who have obtained at least 100 milliliters of pure water from the Century Well will be considered to have completed the challenge," he announced, scanning the crowd. Lan Kan stepped forward, showing their container with its precious cargo. The organizer nodded approvingly, but then frowned when he saw Chumin's condition. "The rules state that each contestant must individually activate the hover transport's locator beacon with their handprint," he said, pointing to a device set up nearby. "Only one person per transport." Lan Kan and Chumin exchanged alarmed looks. This meant only one of them could board the transport, while the other would have to stay behind in the desert until the cleanup team arrived, potentially hours later, with no guarantee of survival given their weakened condition. "That's not right," Lan Kan protested. "We worked together. We both survived." "Rules are rules," the organizer replied impassively. You have 2 minutes to decide who's going on the first transport. Lan Kan found herself facing the most difficult decision yet. She had more than 150 milliliters of water, enough to be declared a successful contestant. Chu Min, despite his contribution, had not personally collected any water. By the strict letter of the rules, she had completed the challenge while he had not. She could take the first transport out, claim her victory, and trust that the cleanup team would arrive in time to save Chu Min. Or she could give up her spot, ensuring Min's immediate evacuation while risking another night alone in the desert, with survival chances approaching zero given her extreme exhaustion. In that moment, looking at Chu Min's pale, exhausted face, Lan Kan remembered all they had been through together. The lizard attack, the collapsing sandpit, the long nights collecting precious drops of water. She thought about her father's teachings about the true meaning of survival. Take the transport, she said firmly, pressing the water container into Chu Min's hands. Tell them about me. I'll find another way out. Chu Min shook his head vehemently. No way. You go. They need someone to win this thing. They argued back and forth as the seconds ticked away, neither willing to leave the other behind. Finally, as the organizer called the final warning, Lan Kan made her decision. Chu Min needs immediate medical attention, she announced loudly. His shoulder is dislocated again, and he's severely dehydrated. I'm giving him my spot on the transport. Before Min could protest further, she helped him to the locator beacon and pressed his hand against it. The device beeped in acknowledgement, and moments later, a hover transport appeared over the ridge, descending to collect him. I'll be fine, she assured him, as the transport's medical team rushed to help him aboard. I still have my wits and what my father taught me. There's a dry creek bed below this ridge. I'll follow it until morning. The cleanup team will find me. As the transport lifted off with Chu Min aboard, Lan Kan used her remaining strength to climb to the top of the ridge. Then, carefully made her way down the other side toward the creek bed her father had once mentioned as a survival strategy. If you can't get on the transport, find the creek bed below the mountain to wait for dawn. The creek bed was bone dry, as expected, but it provided some shelter from the wind. As night fell for what she hoped would be the last time in the desert, Lan Kan set up her sweat collection system once more, gathering what little moisture her body could still produce. Miraculously, as the night deepened, a light rain began to fall, the first precipitation in months in this part of the desert. The droplets were sparse, but Lan Kan spread her plastic sheet wide, collecting every precious drop. By morning, she had another 100 milliliters of water, enough to sustain her until rescue came. When the cleanup hover transport returned the following morning to search for remaining contestants, they found Lan Kan, weak but alive, still diligently collecting water. The medical team was astonished by her resilience and innovative use of minimal resources. Meanwhile, Chu Min had arrived at the challenge headquarters the previous evening. Despite his injuries, he had insisted on speaking to the judges immediately upon arrival. Lan Kan is the true winner, he told them, showing them the water container. This is her water, collected using a technique she developed and taught me. She saved my life multiple times, and then gave me her spot on the transport. If anyone deserves recognition, it's her. The judges were moved by his testimony, particularly when he demonstrated the sweat distillation technique Lan Kan had devised. When she was finally brought in the following day, they made an unprecedented decision. Both Lan Kan and Chu Min would be recognized as shared winners of the 48-hour challenge. Chu Min, unable to attend the award ceremony due to his injuries, was honored as a representative of teamwork and compassion. Lan Kan, after receiving medical treatment, was declared the most resilient survivor and became an instant symbol of water conservation for humanity. 2 weeks later, media outlets worldwide covered a remarkable scene. Lan Kan and Chu Min, now recovered from their ordeal, standing together on stage at the Global Water Conference. They presented their sweat distillation method to an audience of scientists, conservationists, and policymakers. "When we exhaust all external resources," Lan Khan told the rapt audience, "our own bodies become the most powerful resource we have left." The world listened, captivated by the story of two students who had turned their sweat into survival in one of Earth's most unforgiving environments. The story closed with Lan Khan standing once again at the edge of the Nimsa Desert, not as a contestant this time, but as a researcher. In her hands were the blueprints for a sweat distillation machine, designed to help water-starved regions across the planet. Beside her stood Chu Min, his shoulder healed, his perspective forever changed. "Ready to change the world?" she asked him, the desert stretching endlessly before them. "After what we've been through," he replied with a smile, "changing the world seems like the easy part." Together, they stepped forward into the golden sand, no longer adversaries in a challenge but partners in a much greater mission, to ensure that no one, anywhere, would have to fight for the last drop of water as they had done. The desert wind whispered around them, carrying their story to the four corners of the earth, a testament to human ingenuity, cooperation, and the indomitable will to survive against all odds. In the months that followed their dramatic desert survival, Lan Khan and Chu Min became reluctant celebrities. News outlets clamored for interviews. Scientists sought their input on water conservation technologies, and educational institutions requested lectures on their experience. Their sweat distillation method, initially born from desperate necessity, was being studied by engineers for potential application in water-scarce regions worldwide. For Lan Khan, the attention was both validating and uncomfortable. She had never sought fame. Her participation in the challenge had been driven by a desire to test her knowledge and honor her father's teachings. Now, she found herself thrust into the spotlight as a symbol of human resilience and innovation. "I don't understand why people are so fascinated," she confided to Chu Min one evening as they prepared for another presentation. "We did what anyone would do to survive." "No," Min replied, adjusting his now healed shoulder. "We did what most people wouldn't even think of doing. That's why they're captivated." The Planetary Ecology Corporation, recognizing the public relations goldmine they'd stumbled upon, offered them both substantial contracts to become official ambassadors for the company's water conservation initiatives. The money was tempting, especially for Lan Khan, whose family had always lived modestly on her father's engineer's salary. But something about the corporate approach felt wrong to her. "They want to package our suffering as entertainment," she told Min. "They're missing the real message." Instead of signing with the corporation, they established their own foundation, dedicated to developing simple, accessible water conservation technologies for communities in need. They named it Last Drop Initiative, a reminder of their desert ordeal and the preciousness of every water molecule. 6 months after the challenge, Lan Khan returned to the university to complete her final year of studies. Her professors granted her special permission to focus her thesis on the biological mechanisms of human sweating and its potential applications in water purification. The work was groundbreaking, combining biology, engineering, and environmental science in ways that crossed traditional academic boundaries. Chu Min, meanwhile, had undergone a profound personal transformation. The son of wealthy industrialists who had previously viewed environmental concerns as little more than fashionable talking points, he now devoted his family's considerable resources to water conservation projects. His parents, initially bewildered by his newfound passion, eventually supported his efforts, particularly when they saw the positive press it generated for their business interests. "You've changed him," Min's mother told Lan Khan when they finally met at a fundraising gala. "Before the desert, he was just drifting through life. Now he has purpose." Lan Khan smiled politely, but knew the truth was more complex. The desert had changed them both, stripping away pretenses and revealing their core selves. Min had always had depth and compassion. He'd simply never been challenged to show it. Their partnership evolved into something neither had anticipated, a deep friendship built on mutual respect and shared purpose. Though romantic speculations swirled in the media, they remained focused on their mission, finding fulfillment in their work that transcended conventional relationships. 1 year after their desert ordeal, they unveiled the first prototype of the Personal Hydration Recycler, a compact device based on their sweat distillation technique, but enhanced with modern technology. Designed for emergency situations, it could extract and purify moisture from body sweat, breath condensation, and even urine, providing life-saving hydration when no other water sources were available. The initial production run sold out immediately, with emergency response organizations and military units worldwide placing orders. But Lan Khan insisted that for every unit sold commercially, one would be donated to vulnerable communities in water-stressed regions. The technology belongs to everyone, she maintained firmly when investors pushed for a more profit-driven approach. Water is life, and access to it should be a right, not a privilege. As their influence grew, they faced unexpected challenges. Companies selling expensive water purification equipment saw their simple, affordable technology as a threat. Political entities controlling water resources viewed their message of water democratization with suspicion. They received cease and desist letters, faced patent disputes, and even encountered thinly veiled threats. During a particularly difficult period when a major corporation was attempting to block their technology on dubious safety grounds, Lan Khan's father fell seriously ill. The stress of fighting corporate lawyers while spending nights at her father's hospital bedside took a visible toll on her. Chu Min found her one evening slumped over her laptop in the hospital waiting room, dark circles under her eyes, her usually vibrant face gaunt with exhaustion. "You need to rest," he said gently, closing her computer. "Your father wouldn't want you to destroy yourself like this." "I can't stop," she whispered, her voice cracking. "If we give up now, everything we went through means nothing." "Taking care of yourself isn't giving up," he countered. "Remember in the desert, how we had to pace ourselves? This is no different. The fight will still be there tomorrow." Reluctantly, she allowed him to drive her home, where she slept for 14 straight hours, the first real rest she'd had in weeks. When she awoke, she found that Min had assembled a team of pro bono lawyers who had already filed counter-motions against the corporation. "You don't have to carry everything alone," he told her when she called to thank him. "That was the whole point of what we learned, wasn't it? Together, we're stronger." Her father's health eventually stabilized, though he would require ongoing care. The corporate legal challenge was defeated when evidence emerged that the company had falsified safety data about their own products. Slowly, the Last Drop initiative regained momentum. 2 years after the Desert Challenge, they were invited to address the United Nations Assembly on the global water crisis. Standing before representatives from every nation, Lan Khan spoke not as a celebrity or even a scientist, but as someone who had faced the reality of water scarcity in its most primal form. "In the desert," she told the assembly, "I learned that the difference between life and death can be measured in droplets. Right now, millions of people live in that desert every day, not the Neem Sa, but the desert of water insecurity. They collect every drop, ration every sip, and still go thirsty. This isn't just happening in traditionally arid regions. Climate change is creating new deserts, even in once water-rich areas." She paused, looking out at the attentive faces. "The technology to address this crisis exists. The knowledge to implement solutions exists. What we lack is the collective will to prioritize water security for all humanity. This isn't a problem for future generations to solve. It's happening now, and we must act now." Her speech received a standing ovation, and more importantly, sparked concrete commitments from several nations to implement water conservation technologies and policies. The Last Drop initiative was flooded with partnership requests, funding offers, and implementation proposals. Amidst this whirlwind of activity, Lan Kan and Chu Min were approached by the original organizers of the Desert Challenge with an unexpected proposal. They wanted to stage a similar event the following year, but with Lan Kan and Min as consultants to ensure safety and educational value. Their initial reaction was to refuse outright. Their desert experience had been traumatic, despite its ultimately positive outcomes. The thought of others being subjected to similar conditions for entertainment seemed ethically questionable. However, after lengthy discussions, they saw an opportunity to transform the challenge from a survival spectacle into a genuine educational experience. They agreed to participate, but with strict conditions. The challenge would focus on teaching sustainable water usage rather than mere survival. Medical supervision would be constant, and the event would raise funds for water infrastructure in underserved communities. The redesigned challenge became an annual event, drawing participants from around the world eager to learn desert survival techniques and water conservation methods. Instead of abandoning contestants in the desert with minimal resources, the new format included intensive training, followed by a supervised application of skills. The dramatic element remained, but safety and education took precedence over spectacle. 3 years after their original ordeal, Lan Kan stood once again at the edge of the Nimsa Desert, watching as a new group of participants prepared for their modified challenge experience. Beside her, Chu Min monitored the advanced safety systems they had insisted upon. "Do you ever miss it?" he asked unexpectedly. "The simplicity of it all? Just us against the desert. No committees, no corporate partners, no political considerations." Lan Kan considered the question seriously. "Sometimes," she admitted, "there was a clarity there. Every decision was life or death, every resource precious beyond measure. The world made sense in a brutal, honest way." She gestured toward the participants, who were learning to set up sweat collection systems, similar to the one she had improvised years ago. "But this is better, turning our suffering into knowledge, our fear into preparation. We're not just surviving now. We're helping others thrive." As the sun set over the desert, painting the sand in shades of gold and amber, Lan Kan felt a sense of completion. The desert that had nearly claimed her life had instead given her purpose. The thirst that had tormented her had transformed into a fountain of innovation and advocacy. That evening, as the participants settled into their supervised camp, Lan Kan received a message that a remote village in a drought-stricken region had successfully implemented their community-scale sweat reclamation system. Over 300 people now had access to clean drinking water, who previously had none. She shared the news with Chu Min, who squeezed her hand in silent celebration. Words weren't necessary between them anymore. They had developed a shorthand of understanding that transcended conventional communication. Later, as they walked among the dunes under a blanket of stars, Lan Kan reflected on how far they had come from those desperate days of their challenge. The desert remained harsh and unforgiving, but she no longer feared it. Instead, she respected it as a teacher of hard but valuable lessons. "We should expand the program," Min said suddenly, breaking the comfortable silence. "Not just water conservation, but comprehensive environmental resilience. The climate crisis is creating more extreme conditions everywhere. What we learned here could be applied to flood zones, fire-prone regions, areas hit by severe storms." Lan Kan nodded thoughtfully. "From the desert's gift to Earth's guardians," she mused. "It has a certain poetry to it." In the distance, the training camp's lights glowed softly against the darkness, a small island of human ingenuity in the vast ocean of sand. Tomorrow, these participants would begin their journey into the desert, not as contestants in a survival game, but as students of resilience and sustainability. And Lan Khan would be there to guide them, to share what the desert had taught her, that when all external resources fail, the human body and spirit remain powerful beyond measure. That innovation often comes from desperation. That survival, at its core, is about adaptation and cooperation rather than competition. Most importantly, that even in the harshest desert, life finds a way to persist, one precious drop at a time. As midnight approached, Lan Khan and Chu Min returned to the base camp, their footprints in the sand already being erased by the gentle desert wind. Behind them, the Niamsa Desert stretched endlessly, no longer an adversary, but a partner in their ongoing mission to ensure that water, the essence of life itself, would be available to all who needed it, now and for generations to come. The desert had tried to take everything from them. Instead, it had given them a gift beyond measure, the knowledge that, even in the driest places, hope springs eternal, sustained by human ingenuity and the unquenchable will to survive.